systems go. Clear for liftoff.
What is going on, golf fans? It's your boy GS Luke here with our round 4 live stream for the Cognizant Classic. Going to get you guys ready for all of your lineups tomorrow. With first off, a look at the weather report, how the course played today as well, how we can use that to our advantage heading into Sunday. We'll talk through some strategy, lineup construction, also even some contest selection over there on DraftKings to give you guys a good idea, a little game plan out there for tomorrow and how to attack all of your exposure. But today ended up being a pretty good one for yours truly. Ended up doubling up over there in my showdown exposure, which it isn't a takedown, but we'll definitely take that anytime we can profit. Also profited over there on our props for today. And we've got some big lineups over there in the main GPP in contention. We've got some outrights as well. I've got 4 of the top 8 out there for outrights. So living clean heading into a Sunday and really excited for all of the action. I do apologize ahead of time. I do have a migraine right now. So if I seem a little under the weather, maybe a little bit lower energy, that's the reasoning for that. But we're battling through. I've been dealing with it all day. So it is what it is. It's something I deal with a lot over here with my health and something that I've gotten used to dealing with as well. What's going on, Colin? Going to be an epic Sunday. Yeah, dude, this leaderboard is absolutely packed. Going to be a lot of fun. What's going on? Tyler said, finally catching one of these lives. Love the content. Appreciate you stopping on by. And whether you're sipping on some water like I am, I'm recovering from having this headache, or you're enjoying yourself a little bit, maybe with a little whiskey in the cup, hopefully it's a fantastic night for all of you. Let's talk through what we saw for today. So scoring in the morning was a lot easier than the afternoon. I didn't think it was going to be an entire stroke difference. I thought like maybe a half a stroke, but my strategy luckily took a lot of those earlier starters. You'll remember from yesterday's live stream that I wanted to go out there and be as balls to the wall as possible, try and get as much leverage into my lineups, which put me on a lot of those earlier starters because they were lower owned and towards the bottom end of the board. Now, to get not to get too far ahead of ourselves here, but the weather looks a little bit different out there for Sunday, and I wouldn't expect the same sort of split. So though it was about a shot difference today, that is likely not going to happen again tomorrow. And if you take a look at some of your top scorers, like you had a lot of early guys that went off, right? We said Ori could about Joe Highsmith yesterday. It looks like he did over there with his -7 rounds. You had guys like Hoshino, McGreevy go off early as well, but also guys like Henley, Griffin that were later tee times. A lot of these guys like Michael Kim, Sepp Straka, Spawn, Jordan Spieth, all in the latter half of tee times. So it wasn't like you had to go out there and play the morning guys, which is going to be really important out there for tomorrow, because even with the weather, being advantageous towards the first half of tee times, you still had a lot of these players showing up. And now let's take a look at the forecast for Sunday, where you can see it's going to be a little bit more windy out there in the morning. They've got closer to 7 to maybe even 10 miles an hour of sustained wind. You can see in the afternoon as well, after about 2-3 p.m. local time, it does kick up back in that 8 to 10 mile an hour range. There's a little bit of a zone in the middle here. So from about 11 to about 2 p.m. local time, it does look like it's going to get a little bit calmer. And I stress a little bit because it goes from like 9 to 7 miles an hour, right? So let's not pretend like this is a massive difference there, but it does get a little bit less gusty. You can see towards the morning hours, they have the gusts at closer to 17, even 21 miles an hour. And also towards the latter half of the day, they have it going from closer to 10 in that calm period to closer to 15, maybe even 20 towards the very end of the round, which, the morning guys, it looks like they're going to get hit by a good amount of wind. Also, these PM players, which is why I don't think there's going to be a massive difference. The course conditions are probably going to be pretty similar throughout the day. And I do think that the greens are going to continue to firm up. That's happened over every single round so far. But the wind factor is going to bring this back down to earth a little bit. And that, on top of the fact that we are playing a Sunday showdown slate, we've got to consider the placement points on top of just going after raw score, means that you're likely going to have players across all these different tee times. It will be twosomes off of hole number 1 once again. For your later starters, right, no brainer, you're going to need at least 3 guys, likely finishing in the top 5, top 10. The other 3 players, though, can come across a variety of different tee times. You could try and get some players that can take advantage of this little calm stretch. It is only about 4 hours long, so it's not like you could play your entire round out there while it's calm. But if you're teeing off, let's say around like 10 local time or something like that, you're going to get to play your last like 14, maybe 13 holes out there with a little bit less wind than what you had there in the morning. So if you're looking for some of those chasers, which you'll probably need 2 or 3 of those out there at every single lineup, I don't think it's a bad idea to look at that portion of the tee time. So go over there on PGAtour.com, right? They have all the tee times on there. You can see exactly who's starting right about then, but that's smack dab in the middle of tee times. You've got them going from 8 a.m. to about 2 p.m. local time, which means right there in the middle, the guys there around T35, T34, that sort of thing, are going to be the players right smack dab in that zone. So this is the current forecast. This, of course, can change as time goes on. But as of right now, it looks a little wonky. I mean, the calm stretch in the middle isn't something we see very often. If you take a look at a few other forecasts, this NEM model has it a little bit windier in the afternoon than the morning. So this kind of looks like what we ended up getting today, which is interesting over there for Sunday. This Medio Blue model looks extremely flat. So unlike the wind that you see on those other 2, this icon also looks pretty flat. You have that same kind of little calm window in the center. So that one is kind of lining up with the HRRR. This GFS model also looks like a little bit calmer in the middle. And they're all kind of calling for that, which is this is a strange weather pattern, one that we don't see very often. And now we've got 3 of the 5 models that we've gone through that are all calling for that same sort of effect. So while I'd normally be a little bit skeptical about that actually being the case, if it was only the HRRR model that was calling for this, maybe we'd say like, okay, HRRR might just be wrong here. But you've got 2 other models corroborating that same sort of story, which could be a little edge out there for Sunday Showdown. So make sure you guys stay on top of this. If you don't already have a windy.com subscription, I would recommend getting over there and becoming a member of their site. And I am not sponsored by them, or I have no incentive to tell you to go over there and sign up, but it's very cheap. It costs you, I think, like $15 out there for the entire month, and you can get all of this weather data for yourself, right? You don't have to come to a live stream. If you want to have it completely up to the second that you're searching for, that's what that is for on there. So that's what we've got for the weather. That's what we've got for the golf course. What we're going to do next is we're going to talk through some shots gained metrics together, what I'm looking for out there in my player pool, and then we're going to wrap it up with the contest selection and the lineup construction talk. So now's the time, by the way, if you guys have any specific questions, to go ahead, throw those down in the chat. It can be DFS strategy questions. It can be player pool questions, maybe a deep dive stat wise on a certain player that you're curious about. Feel free to let me know. But other than that, we're going to go through some of the stats from today. We'll talk about some of the round 3 poppers, and we're going to zoom out and take a look at the event as a whole and get a real good sense for who's played well over the first 3 rounds. So before we do so, I do want to catch up on chat, and we'll go ahead and hop into the metrics here in a second. Do I think Clan can win this thing? No, I don't. He's way too far back, in my opinion, Noah. I would love to see him win, but that would be extremely unlikely. Migraines do suck, Jose, but luckily I take medication to make them a little bit more manageable. And I was able to get some out there on the golf course. So I had a buddy of mine bring it to me out there. I didn't have it with me. So that was great. And we have great people, by the way, at the PGA Tour. I got to give credit where credit's due. Their medical staff out there is unbelievably helpful. Like, you have anything go wrong, could be anything. You could have arthritis. You could have, I have family members that have issues with heart palpitations, that sort of thing. They go way out of their way to accommodate people. So they were very helpful today as well. What's going on, Nick Cat? Good to see you made it. A few beers while I still watched. I wish I could have, Nick. They were free today as well, and I wasn't able to partake. You love round 4. You think there's going to be someone from the back who wins this? I could see it. As far back as I would go, I know we had the question about Luke Clanton. Like, the reason why I don't think he can win this thing, I mean, if he shoots 59, sure, he could go out there and win this thing. But he's starting 5 shots off the lead. 6 shots off of Jake Knapp, 5 shots off of second, 4 shots off of third place. You have enough good players up here, like Berger, Fowler, Gim. I mean, honestly, this whole top 10 here, they're all solid players. Guys that you wouldn't be completely mind-blown if they went out there and won. Like maybe McGreevy, maybe Highsmith, right? You'd be surprised if they went out there and actually won this thing. Every other player up here, you really wouldn't bat an eye at. I guess I'd throw Taylor Montgomery into that as well. He would kind of be a surprise winner coming from way behind. but one of these guys is shooting -4, -5 tomorrow. I mean, you're not going to get the entire field that goes out there and lays an egg, especially when it's these quality of players. So yeah, if somebody's going to like come back to win this thing, like Clanton at -10, I guess it's within his range of outcomes, but it's more than likely going to be like one of these -11s is probably where I would draw the line, or more realistically, one of these -12s that goes out there and gets the job done. But either way, it's going to be a very interesting Sunday showdown slate because we have so many quality players to go out there and use in lineups. And because it is so bunched up there towards the top, Knapp's going to be chalky. I've got him over 40% in my projections. I've got guys like Kim, Henley over 30% themselves. But when you start to get down to these like T8s, these guys that are T14, the -11s, the ownership starts to get a lot more spread out. So I kind of like the way it sets up. You're going to have some chasers there at -11, -12 that I think are really good plays for tomorrow that aren't going to be as chalky as those top tier guys. So if that's what you meant, by the way, those chasers were going to be really good plays. And I agree with you on that end. What's going on, Andy? Good luck tomorrow. I see you have a couple of live lineups in the Drive the Green. Yeah, that's what I was mentioning before. You may have just joined us, Andy, but I've got a lot of sweats going on right now. I had one for Showdown today, ended up kind of falling off towards the end. JJ Spawn making a bogey at 17 was just killer. If he has that bogey-free round, I end up having like a 5-6x day when it comes to my ROI. But yeah, we've got some big $5 lineups out there in contention. I was in first place for a little bit today. That was fun. You can see out there on the golf course, and some outright bets as well. Looking forward to seeing some beige Bermuda. Yeah, this should happen out there in the PM. The greens are definitely drying out. What's going on, Joseph? Welcome on into the live stream. Welcome on in, Darren. I don't know how to say your name. Maybe it's Logan out there. Unfortunate that Lowry killed you. I did not go down with the ship there. Am I going to follow anybody tomorrow or just hang out with the bear trap? I'll probably try and follow some groups, like especially the leaders when they get out there. But because I'm not feeling the best, there's a really good chance when I first get there tomorrow, and I'm just going to post up in the bear trap and sip on a few transfusions or that sort of thing. It's Sunday when we get the whole way to there. Probably will start to have a few drinks, and I'll probably stay out of the sun as much as I possibly can. Dumpy Bo, or he could. Yeah, he'd be an or he could guy. I do have a comment about him, though, Wayne. I've never seen a player more pissed off on the golf course than Bo Hostler today. I watched him play 2 holes, and I heard 6 F-bombs on those 2 holes. He had a shot on 11. Maybe they have video of it. Maybe they don't. It hit the back portion of the green on 11, and it bounced like it hit a cart path. And that's what he said. He said, fuck this. Sorry, I guess I shouldn't be saying all these F-bombs, but he said, F this. This is such a, bleeping, bleepy, bleep. He went through a whole sentence screaming it, by the way, when there are kids nearby. And he gets up near the green. He hits a pretty good chip to like 6 feet, and then he drops like another 2 or 3 F-bombs. So that being said, yeah, he did not have his best stuff today, Wayne. Did not have his mental capacity there either, or he could, right? If he can figure that out, maybe he wakes up feeling a little bit better tomorrow, better perspective on where he is. Like, he's not in contention now, or he's got to go out there, just kind of put it together, try and get a top 25, that sort of thing, go out there and make a paycheck. That could be good for him. But yeah, what I saw today, man, it was a tough scene. I've never been that mad before in a golf course, and I snapped clubs, and he was more pissed than that, if that tells you anything. Thoughts on Norgard? Always a high upside play, C-Rob, but you're not going to use them for placement points. So if you're using them in lineups, it'd be for one of your like 2-3 chasers that you're using to get some leverage to the field on. So just know like why you'd be using a Norgard. If you're using them for placement point, like trying to use them as a conviction play, don't do that out there for Sunday. Those kind of guys that you're using at 30-40% of your lineups, you want to be a little bit closer up there to that top 20. So good leverage play. That's probably where I would leave it off there. You're seeing Ricky Castillo as a solid sleeper. Yeah, we're going to talk about Castillo, and yeah, I'm playing him tomorrow as a sleeper play. Can I deep dive Luke Clanton? He got a double bogey on what should have been a 4-foot par. Yeah, I saw that today, and I would say that the stat profile is probably a little bit better than what it actually should be. So he gained a bunch off the tee. He definitely hit the ball well off the tee. His approach play today, it says it's over here into the positive. I mean, he was off compared to most of his rounds. He had a few darts over there on the front 9. That's likely why he's into the positive there. But, stat profile wise, he did gain tee to green. He did lose over there with the putter. Sorry, I guess that's for the entire event that we're looking at there. If we zoom in on just today, he gained to the 2 ball striking categories and then lost a little bit over 2 at the putter. A lot of that came on that 3 putt that you had on hole number 4 today. But outside of that, he still lost over his 18 holes. So a decent stat profile. Like if you're looking for a chaser, Luke Clanton, really good showdown play. Like he's not going to win this event, but you don't need to win the event to go out there and be a play in showdown. You shoot something like -5 tomorrow, and that could be a top 10 finish. And, -5 plus a top 10 finish is likely enough to crack the optimal lineup. So yeah, I think he's a good showdown play. I wouldn't bet him to win though. Probably a little bit too far back. Lowry will be in your player pool. I could see it. Yeah, good bounce back. And yeah, anytime I see comments on people mad at a player, I'm very, very interested in getting to a bounce back. And Wayne, we're going to look at the shots gained metrics here. He's a really good bounce back candidate if you're looking at the shots gained metrics. What's going on, Brian? Welcome on in. How far back is too far back? That's not such a thing. I don't use that kind of thing in showdown, man. What are you only going to play guys that are up there getting placement points then? Like that'd be silly, especially in large field GPPs. Like you shouldn't have 6 guys in your lineup that are all going to try and finish top 10. So that's not really something that I do. So I don't really have an answer for you because that's not part of my process. And yeah, I guess if you're asking about the win, -11 might be too far back, but I don't think that's what he's asking about, Corey. Like normally when people ask that question, they're asking about like where to cut off their player pool. Like only the play guys starting at a certain number, and I wouldn't do that. Like if there are guys like Norgard, guys that are starting a little bit earlier that you want to take for leverage, please do. Like you need those players in large field GPPs to get different. And we'll talk about that when we get to the lineup construction. Let's go through some shots gained metrics now. So in terms of your round 3 stats, I like to look for your approach poppers. This is always going to be the case over there when we're going through showdown. And this is where Shane Lowry pops up. So I promised you that we'd see him over here on this sheet. He lost 4 strokes short game. That never happens out there for Shane Lowry, but this is a perfect example of why short game is so volatile. So to bring up today, right, we know lost 4 strokes there. Remember round 2 when he chipped in twice in a row where he gained over 3 strokes when he came to the around the green play? I know I do, right? He went out there today and then lost nearly 2 strokes in that category. That's why when somebody has a really good day in the short game categories, I put a big red flag up. And another guy that fit that description today, and I hate to pick on him, but Jesper Svensson, the guy that we've mentioned multiple times this week as due for some short game regression, lost 3 strokes around the green. So if you think this is all mumbo jumbo with the shots gained metrics, you better learn real quickly because it's not. These sort of players, it's just pure statistics, right? Regression back to the mean is what we're looking at there. And guys like Lowry could be due for a really good Sunday performance. And you could say that about guys like a Victor Perez. He lost in the 2 short game categories, gained over 4 strokes out there with the ball striking. Nikolai Højgaard had a good approach day, solid putting, so maybe not as due for some regression. But if you go down here to guys like Ricky Castillo, let's find him. So he gained both off the tee and on approach, and then lost over a stroke over there with the putter. So these sort of players are players that I'm looking for a little bit of a bounce back. Brian Harman, by the way, this is another one that really doesn't make sense. Gained off the tee, gained on approach, was striping it, but lost in the 2 short game categories, which is just not something that you're going to see happen very often for a player like Brian Harman. And for guys like, let's say Shane Lowry with the putter, like he can be a little sketchy with the flat stick. Like he may have a tournament or 2 where he loses strokes on the greens all 4 times. Somebody like a Brian Harman, there's probably only 1, maybe 2 events in his entire career where he's lost strokes putting over all 4 rounds, like all 4 rounds in a row. So let's see what Brian Harman's done, actually, just to confirm that from this week. So round number 2, he lost putting. Round number 1, he gained putting. So look at that, right? So he was able to go out there and get into the positive round number 1, but he lost round 2. He obviously lost today, as we just highlighted. I would argue that he's even more due for some regression back to the mean compared to some of the other guys that we went through there. So that's why I look at some of the ball striking poppers. You can look at shots gained ball striking as well, actually combining off the tee and approach play together there. We were just looking at regular approach play before. So that's where guys like Castillo really go towards the top there. Players like Fishburne, he was a little bit over positive out there with the putter, but another guy who was really hitting the ball well today. Guys like Rico Hoey, Luke Clanton shows up on this list. You also have players like a Max Grazerman that are really checking the boxes with their ball striking. Grayson Sigg, also a player that lost over 2 strokes with a putter today. All guys that I would give a little bit of a boost to. And you can say the same thing about a Chris Kirk. He gained over a stroke on approach today, but lost over there with the putter. By the way, another past champion at PGA National. So somebody, is extremely familiar and comfortable on this golf course. All players that I'm giving a little boost in my projections. Now on the flip side, just like we want to see guys that are gaining out there on approach, we don't really want to see it out there with the short game. And so if we take a look at some of the guys that gained a whole bunch in this category, I wouldn't count on it happening again. So a Joe Highsmith, a Chris Ventura, that gained over 3 strokes in the category, they're due to come back down to earth a little bit. Guys like a Spawn, Rogers, Whaley, all up here towards the top end of the board are players that, unless they're really checking the box out there in other categories, are the kind of players that I'm actively looking to fade over there for tomorrow. And I think Highsmith would probably be the best example of this. I know he had that super low rounds, right? Or he could absolute nuke out there in the morning wave, but he did it with the short game. Like, this is a ball striking first player, somebody that usually loses strokes to the field with his shots gained putting, and he gained like 4 strokes over his baseline. So you wouldn't expect that to happen multiple days in a row. Same thing with around the green. We take a look at some of those poppers. Rakuya Hoshino, who went absolutely nuclear on his front 9. A lot of that became because of his around the green and his putting. So somebody that not only was hot in one category, but was hot in both short game categories, which is an even bigger red flag than just one of them by themselves. But guys like Chan Kim did the same exact thing, over 2 shots gained around the green and also out there with the putter. These sort of players, you might want to downgrade out there in your process as well. Now, the flip side is true, right? If you take a look at guys that lost a whole bunch with their short game today, you could also try and find some bounce back candidates. So that's where like guys like Clanton, Lowry come into play, as we were talking about before. But like a Tom Hoagie, a Grayson Sigg, a Johnny Vegas, who, by the way, Johnny Vegas had a really good putting day in round 2. So it's not like it's completely unheard of for him to go out there and have a good event here. And he also has a really good course history around PGA National as well. So in this category, this is where you can try and find guys that, even if they just putt to a neutral out there tomorrow, could be a significant improvement over round 3. You look at around the green as well. So guys like Jesper, I would argue, would be due for a little bit of short game regression. So as much as, we clowned on him the first few days because of the fact that he was playing way above his head, now that he lost 3 strokes around the green, you may expect him to go back into the positive, because just to go ahead and show you guys what he did rounds 1 and 2, maybe you didn't tune into the live streams. Round 1, gained a bunch putting, but also gained around the green. Round number 2, same thing, gained a whole bunch putting. Tomorrow, right, go back to being a neutral around the green. Maybe you do gain a whole bunch of strokes putting again, like you did days 1 and 2, and that could be something like a -5 round, and that might be like a top 7, a top 10 when it comes to your placement as well. So those are the kind of things I'm looking for in my round 3 stats. If you're going to look at the event as a whole, I mostly do that for the top end of the board. So what we're going to do for that is we're just going to sort it by current score, take a look at the top 5, top 10, and I use this to try and find my conviction plays. And as you guys will know, I'm a huge ball striking truther, somebody that thinks that that is by far the most consistent part of golf from day to day. So guys like Doug Gim that have gained nearly 10 strokes on approach, I mean, that is next level stuff right there, are the kind of guys that I would use as conviction plays for tomorrow. You could say that about a Michael Kim. He's gaining across both categories there. Ricky Fowler looks really good with his ball striking this week, except Straka gaining nearly 5 strokes over there with his approach play. And Matthew Pavon, even though he didn't have the best round number 3, he is gaining over 4 strokes with the iron play so far. A Joel Damon, a Victor Perez down here, you can see gaining close to 6 strokes approach over the first 3 rounds, are the kind of conviction plays that I'm using towards the top. And the off the tee play is also extremely helpful. So I guess we'll bring it back to the leaderboard there. But if you look at the shots gained ball striking tab, some of these players are also getting some attention. Now, it's a lot of the same guys that we were pointing out before, but like a Brian Harmon here, I mean, he's gaining 2.6 strokes off the tee. Of your top level players, he's the 3rd best driver out there behind a Ricky Fowler, who, by the way, Ricky, best driver in the field. That is absolutely nuts. You never see that out there for Ricky. Michael Kim, number 2. Then number 3, even more surprising, I'd say, than those top 2, is Brian Harmon out here gaining over 2.5 strokes over the first 3. So those are the kind of players that I'm looking to get well over the field on. Some guys I'd be looking to fade might be guys that are short game dependent. And Taylor Montgomery, he's short game dependent, right? He's gained over 8.5 shots gained putting to this point. And unless he goes out there and he's making everything on the greens again tomorrow, he's likely going to come back down to earth. So just like with the other categories for round 3, where you have reasons to go out there and find guys and make them conviction plays, you can also use the shots gained metrics to go out there and find guys to fade. that on top of the SHIPIT Nation stone that we have out here for round 4, and you guys could be really cooking out there with your process. On the stone, of course, you've got the approach series, also the putting series that you can use for trying to find some really positive true approach deltas, putting deltas as well, and for your round 4 historical, which gives us a good sense for how players go out there and play on Sundays with that pressure, with the added benefit or added, thoughts of going out there and trying to make a paycheck. You have players that react to that pressure differently. And by having metrics like you have there on the stone, you're able to go out there and find some of those sort of players. So the shots gained metrics are just one piece of that puzzle. The stone, other metrics are another piece of that. You've got weather, which we mentioned before, which not going to be a massive factor out there for tomorrow, I don't think. But ownership is probably the biggest note of all of them. So we're going to talk about that when we go through the lineup construction segment here in just a second. But before we do so, let me see if there's any last second questions to touch on. And we're going to do a little bit of contest selection as well before we do that full deep dive. Where'd we go? Where are we at? Gotcha. Jesper hit a sand shot that we can all relate to. Yeah, that's for damn sure. Any chance that Hoshino can make it to the top 5? I'm sure he could if he has a super low rounds, but I wouldn't count on it, Hank. He was super short game dependent today, gained like 4 strokes in those 2 categories. I think he's going to have a lower round tomorrow. Regression means to be worse. So you're not always doing better. Yeah, no, that's not true, Brian. There's positive and there's negative regression. There's multiple terms that go out there and mean that. So I've seen you say that before, Brian. You're incorrect. Like, I've taken stats classes. I'm an engineering major, electrical engineer by trade, computer science minor. I've had to take 4 or 5 stats classes in my lifetime, and I use it for my modeling. You're incorrect. Just trying to say that nicely, man. There's definitely words for positive and negative regression. Yeah, look up the meaning. Trust me, I've looked up the meaning before, man. You're wrong. You got to look it up yourself. Yeah, he means positive regression. Exactly. Anyways, I'm going to ignore the talk on that because, Brian, just look it up. You're incorrect. What's going on, Barry? Long time, been on the grind. Let's go, Mike Kim. That would be pretty sweet. What is the difference between approach and approach delta? So that's a better question for the SHIPIT Nation guys, but approach, I'm not really even sure what you're talking about. Like, there's multiple things that you could say for approach. Approach delta, I'll just bring up the stone so I can show you. I can make it easier for you, I guess. It's because you didn't word your question very well at all. I don't know what you mean by approach. Like, do you mean shots gained approach? Do you mean the true approach that they have on the stone? So that's why I'm going to bring up the stone so we can go through it together here. This will be the stone for yesterday, by the way, so don't be using this thinking that it's for tomorrow. It's not. All right, so I guess they're in the middle of changing it out there at round 4. So we might not be able to go through this together. I'll just explain it based on what I know. So the true approach is essentially takes out the outliers from your approach stats. So regular shots gained approach is what we're seeing over here. That's what the Tour puts out. It includes outliers. So for example, Jesper hitting that ball into the water, right? That's included out there with regular shots gained. The true stats that you see over there on the SHIPIT Nation stone take out the massive swing holes. So for example, like a hole out eagle. For example, going out there and hitting a water ball, right? That gets taken out of your true approach. And then what they do is they compare that out there to your baseline to see whether you're playing better or worse than your baseline. So again, it's much better to be explained over there on the SHIPIT Nation stone. They have whole videos going out there and breaking it down. But you might want to clarify your question too. It wasn't very specific. Brian got schooled. Hey, I'm not trying to do that, Darren. I'm not that sort of guy, but he is very incorrect about that. Like, there are multiple terms for that, right? Like, if you're doing worse than your average, like, you can regress back to your mean that way. And you can also regress back to your mean if you're playing better, right, than you're used to. Because it's really easy to figure out, guys, right? Like, let's assume that you're flipping a coin. It's a 50-50 prospect, right? You flip a coin 10 times, you get heads, let's say 7 out of the 10 times. You've had more heads than you've had tails. It doesn't mean the next one's going to be tails, right? But over a large enough sample size, let's say out to like 1 million coin flips, it's going to be 50-50. So when we say that it's regressing back to its mean, it means that over a large enough sample size, he's going to play like he normally does. Or that coin is going to be a 50-50 coin flip like it normally is. So there's definitely a term for that, right? If it was 3 out of 7, it'd be regression in the other way. It works the exact same way. And again, I'm not trying to be mean about that. I'm just trying to set people straight because it's definitely a well-known thing. You feel like tomorrow plays right at par. I do think it plays harder. For sure, I think it's going to play a little bit harder. Approach is the shots gained approach, then Delta is taking out the really good shots. That's true approach, actually, to Peach. But yeah, you are right. I know exactly what you're saying there. The true approach is when they take out that stuff. The Delta is when you do that comparison, as you were saying. What's going on, Zach? Throw back some magnesium glycinate for the migraine. You're saying it's not medical advice. I may try that. I don't have any of that myself, Zach, but I'll definitely look into it at this point. That's true. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and yeah, by the way, Zach, this is 100% correct when it comes to the approach delta and stuff like that. Make sure to check that out. You're only messing about. I don't know if you are, Brian. I think you actually thought that was the case, but hey, we'll let you think that if you want to, I guess. Approach and approach delta question seemed clear to you. It didn't, though, honestly. If we go back to it, he's asking, because on the Stone C. Smith, I don't know if you're a part of the SHIPIT Nation site, you're able to check that out and whatnot. They have true approach, they have their regular shots gained metrics, and then they have true approach delta, right? There's 3 separate categories. When you say approach, which one are you talking about? Like, I don't know, man. I don't know if you're just trying to be a dick or not, but yeah, it wasn't a very clear question. What do we think about Jackson Suber? So good question. Go over here, look at the metrics. So Jackson Suber gaining on approach over the first 3 rounds. Today in particular was not great, though. He only gained over there with his putter. This is an or he could sort of player. He's at T43. You're not using him for placement points. Right? There's only one clear place that you'd be using Jackson Suber for tomorrow, and that's to try and get a super low-owned player into your lineup. Now, I think there's probably better players to get to. He's not at the top of my short list out there for trying to get some leverage, but he is hitting the ball well. His iron play has been solid. He's made 17 birdies over 3 rounds, so averaging just under 6 per round. You know, there's an or he could for anyone, I suppose. You just got here thoughts on Victor Perez and Lowry. Yeah, so we went through them with the shots gained metrics. Both of them really solid approach play today. So if we go over here to the approach and just sort it by round 3, there's Shane Lowry and there's Victor Perez. So if you're a ball striking truther, if you're somebody that likes guys that are hitting the ball well, then you've got your wish there out there with those 2. All right, let's talk through some contest selection and then some lineup construction as well. So if you guys are going out there and trying to figure out what contest to enter, they look very similar to what we've had the last few days. So this big final round finale, so this is the big $25 GPP, you know, the sand trap that we've had for the last few days. It's also a fourth to first place. So it's essentially just a little bit bigger. The prize pool is a little bit bigger as well, but it's the same proportion out there to first place. You do have this 4-entry $250 contest as well. So it's $1,000 to go out there and max enter this. It is a 5th to first place. So it's a little bit better than what you had for yesterday. Yesterday was only 40K up top, 40K total, and then 10K up top, just like it was for today. So a slightly lower percentage that they have going out there to first place. This is where a lot of my exposure came in today. I didn't end up playing as heavy for round 3 showdown as maybe I typically do, but I did enter this $100 single entry as it was one of the better contests that you had out there. Tomorrow, they ruined it, though. It was a 20K contest for today, and it was 3K out there to first place. Now, it's a 5th out there to first place, so 20% out there to first. Just, it's not horrible. It's not a terrible payout structure like you have when it gets closer to like 30, 40%, but it's not ideal. It's not like what we had out there for round number 3. So I've got to say these contests are pretty trash so far. We do have the $5 GPP, so this is a 150 max, also 20% to first place, which as I said, it's not ideal, but it's not the worst payout structure that I've seen. If we go down a little bit further, I believe they do have that $10 18 max that we had over the last few rounds. And this one is 10% to first place. So I normally play much heavier than $180 for showdown. Like today was one of my later days. I had like $300 in action out there for today. Normally it's closer to like $500 to $1,000. But if they're not going to give us contests that have any sort of long-term sustainability, then I'm not going to play the same sort of money that I normally do. So I'm probably going to max enter this. I'll probably go out there, try and enter some sort of single entry. It's not going to be that big one where it was 25% to first place or whatever it is there. But if they have some like $12 single entries, some $33 single entries that are a little bit better payout structures, or heck, even like some $5 ones to go out there and enter, I'd rather do that than enter one that is a little bit too top heavy for my liking. They have this one here that's a little bit of a smaller contest. 55 entries is almost too small out there for my liking. So I'm going to say these contests are sub-ideal. They're not my favorite. Now, you've got ones like this. Like this is that $33 single entry that I was mentioning. This isn't going to be as high stakes as what I normally like to play, but the payout structure in these contests, it's a little bit over 10% that they're giving out the first place right here, but it is much closer to what you actually want to see for a payout structure than what you have with a lot of these ones that are like 200K prize pools, 150K prize pools up here towards the top. Like heck, even this 555 is a third out there to first place. It's just not what you want out there when you're trying to find sustainable contests. So I'm probably going to keep my exposure a little bit later than normal just because of that. Now, you do have this 12 entry $44 that also has like a decent payout structure. But even this one, it's 20% to first place, just a little bit under that out there for first. Just not my kind of jam. Like I may enter a few lineups out there, but max entering, just not my sort of thing out there for tomorrow. In terms of actually putting together lineups, this is where it gets a little bit more interesting for tomorrow. And what I normally like to do over here with my Sunday lineups is I get my placement points out of the way done and early, right? So I'm not having to worry about them with my last 3 spots. And that's where I'm going to make sure I get my leverage out there in our lineup. So up top, we're going to have to take some chalk here, but that's kind of unavoidable if we got to get those guys in the top 5, top 10. So let's start with our winner. Let's go out there and game script who we think can go out there and win this thing. I'm going to throw in a Russell Henley, and he's not the one I want to win. That's for damn sure. But I think starting a few shots off the lead, that he's got a chance to go out there and make it interesting. Let's throw him in there. Let's throw a Doug Gim in with some of his shots gained metrics. And for our last player for placement points, I'm going to drop down just a little bit further because we're not really trying to get the winner with this sort of play. This is more so we're looking for like a -5, right? Maybe getting into that top 3, top 5 when it's all said and done. Let's throw in a Brian Harman. So with these 3 players, we've got a potential winner with somebody like Henley or Gim, right? It could be either one of those two that goes out there and actually gets the job done. One of the two is probably going to have to be a close call out there to go out there and win it, because we're not going to get away with these guys shooting like -2 and making the optimal lineup. These sort of players are going to have to shoot something like -4, -5 to have any chance of going out there and being optimal. If it plays a little bit harder, maybe it is like -3, -4 that you have to have for the optimal performance, but you're not just going to get handed that. We don't have somebody with a 10-shot lead here where they can just go out there, do nothing, and go out there and win. And even if you did that, let's say somebody did have a 10-shot lead and they shot like -1, went out there and won the golf tournament, that does not make them a guarantee at all to go out there and make the optimal. So that's why you've got to have some players up here towards the top, but you don't want to be counting on these guys to shoot like -1. They still got to go out there and score, which is why we're trying to find guys that fit the mold when it comes to the shots gained metrics. Like guys like Henley, he looked a lot better on his approach play today. Still has not gained a whole bunch of strokes putting. So I would argue that he could continue to keep it going. Guys like Gim, Harman, we know the ball striking just through the roof on those two, whether it's lately or over the entire event. And now for our last 3 spots here, and you could try and take another guy towards the top if you wanted to. If you were in like a single entry, or let's say one of those smaller GPPs, so let's say like that 4 $250 contest where you can go out there and enter those 4 $250 entries. If you do that and you're only playing against a couple hundred entries, maybe you do take a 4th guy up here towards the top, but that doesn't mean that you have to be mega chalky about who you're taking. So for the sake of this, we're going to build first out here for like a single entry, and then we're going to adjust our lineup out there for the large scale GPPs. And a single entry, like I'd be totally okay if you mixed in a Højgaard here. But for your last 2 players, this is where you've got to get different to the field. And a player like a Chris Kirk could go out there, give you some of that leverage. And where you'd want to avoid playing somebody here with your last man in would be guys like a Pavon or a Highsmith, because if you took another chalky guy up there towards the top, that's 5 spots where you're going out there and taking somebody that's going to be over 10, 15% ownership. Now, if you're in like a cash contest, whatever, right? Like you go out there, you optimize projection. I understand doing that there, but in any sort of GPP where you've got to beat the rest of the field, you've got to have that leverage to actually move up in contests. You should be making sure that you have differentiation, and at least 2 spots, I would say. That's why we started with like 4 kind of chalky players. And then as long as you took like, let's say a Celinda, maybe it's a Hoagie, a Rosner down there as your last man in, you'd get away with this kind of lineup. If you leave some salary on the table, it's going to only help you out even more when it comes to getting that differentiation. But having those two pivots is really where you're going to move up the board if you get things right. But if this was in the large field GPP, let's say like the big sand trap, I guess it's like the final round finale or whatever they call it over here for Sunday, this is where you might want to take out one of those chalky players and get a little bit different about your mid-tier options. So rather than going with a Nikolai Højgaard, maybe you take a chance on Hostler and him rebounding after him cussing at himself after every single shot. Maybe you still use that Chris Kirk as that little bit of leverage. And for your last man in here in that large field GPP, you definitely can't use like a Damon, or even a Svensson, I'd say, over here at -10, because you'd be much too popular out there in those sort of contests. And especially if it's a Joel Damon and you're spending all of your salary, leaving the $100 on the table to take Svensson, I actually don't think would change things all that much. If you started to leave more salary on the table, went down here to like a Bridgman, right, leaving $300, and maybe a Hoey leaving $300, I think you might get away with that out there in the large field GPP, but even that would be pushing it. So in those sort of contests, I'd recommend taking 2, if not 3 leverage pieces, pivots down there towards the bottom end of the board to offset some of that chalk towards the top. So, Sunday lineup construction is a lot different than what we have for rounds 2 and 3. Rounds 2 and 3, you don't have to have any chalk. If you want to go out there, play 6 guys that are low owned, that you think are good plays and that have upside, then do it, right? Because you don't have to worry about where they're starting. Sunday, we can't do that. You don't have that same sort of luxury. We're going to have some of those guys that finish top 5, where you can get a little bit more creative about it, where you can use the shots gained metrics, especially the round 3 stuff, to try and find some diamonds in the rough, or with those players a little bit further down the board. So, for example, I know we didn't mention Lowry as like a spend up, but if you're going to use a spend up and try and get different, Lowry's really the only one you can use, because guys like Griffin, Straka, Berger, Henley, I've got all over 20% ownership. Lowry, I've got it under 10% because he's starting here at T35. You can also get different towards the top end of the board, but the opportunity cost with doing so is that you can't take the studs like a Henley, a Berger, a Straka, Griffin, that are all in perfect position to go out there and finish top 5. So it's just, you got to think through the pros and cons, right, of going out there and making all of those kind of pivots. I think the far more common pivots that you're going to see people using are the ones a little bit further down the board. And that's what we went through out there in that lineup. I don't disagree with that, though. Right? There's a reason why people tend to make their pivots a little bit further down the board, but I don't want to completely ignore going out there and using guys like a Shane Lowry. So consider that out there with your strategy as well. Let's see. If I had to pick a horse to win, who would I get? That's a tough one, Hef. If I had to pick one that I want to win, now that's really easy. I've got like 4 guys I'd go up there and choose. But if I had to pick just one guy to go out there and win, and I'll probably be wrong on this, I haven't thought about it all that much. You're putting me on the spot with a question that I'm not really prepared to answer for you, but maybe Russell Henley. Like, he was the first guy I kind of gravitated towards when I was going out there and trying to find a winner. The reason I say that, by the way, is he's the most consistent ball striker that we have up here towards the top. But even he is an absolute nutcase on Sundays. He's had plenty of chokes out there when he's been in the lead. So I think it'll be fun, man. I'm not sure who's going to win, but I hope it's one of my outrights. Sounds like the magnesium deficient, just go take some vitamins. Yeah, I do take vitamins, Jeff. This is something that's been going on for me for quite some time. So it's not quite that easy, unfortunately, but I appreciate the advice and the help anyways, guys. All right, that's all I've got for the live stream, though, guys. Best of luck out there with all of your exposure for tomorrow. You're going to be there in person, hopefully sweating out a GPP takedown, maybe an outright cash as well. But either way, I'm looking forward to it. It should be an absolute blast. Best of luck with everything that you guys are doing. I'll see you guys for all the content throughout the rest of the year.